As Jesus began to paint the portrait of a true Christian in the Sermon on the Mount in Matthew 5, we see how countercultural they are to our modern ideas of true virtue. These are not the fashionable virtues of our present culture. The first beatitude is neediness and dependence. Jesus begins his sermon by describing his disciples as those who are poor. He says, God blesses those who are poor and realize their need for Him, for the kingdom of heaven is theirs. Matthew 5 verse 3. Why did Jesus begin with poverty of spirit? The Puritan preacher and author of the 1600s, Thomas Watson, wrote, quote, "Poverty of spirit is the very basis and the foundation of all the other graces." Close quote. From this perspective, the Prince of Preachers, Charles Spurgeon, said, quote, "No man ever mourns before God until he is poor in spirit. Neither does he become meek towards others till he has humble views of himself." Hungering and tasting after righteousness are not possible to those who have high views of their own excellence, and mercy to those who offend is a grace too difficult for those who are unconscious of their own spiritual need. Poverty in spirit is the pouch of the temple of blessedness. As a wise man never thinks of building up the walls of his house till he has first digged out the foundation, so no person skillful in divine things will hope to see any of the higher virtue where poverty of spirit is absent. Till we are emptied of self, we cannot be filled with God. Stripping must be wrought upon us before we can be clothed with the righteousness which is from heaven. Christ is never precious till we are poor in spirit. We must see our own wants before we can perceive his wealth. Pride blinds the eyes and sincere humility must open them, or the beauties of Jesus will be forever hidden from us. The straight gate is not wide enough to allow that man to enter who is great in his own esteem. It is easier for a camel to go through the eyes of a needle than for a man conceited of his own spiritual riches to enter into the kingdom of heaven. Hence, it is clear that the character described in connection with the first beatitude is essential to the production of those which follow after. And unless a man possesses it, he may look in vain for favor at the hands of the Lord. The pride are cursed. Their pride alone secures them in the curse and shuts them out from divine regard. Close quote. The adjective of the word poor comes from the verb that means to bow down dependently. It ultimately describes the posture of a beggar as he holds his cup, begging for money from those passing by. The word actually means to be destitute. That's why there are those who see Christianity as a crutch for people who can't make it on their own. And they are right. Jesus made it clear. Happy are the people who do not find a basis for merit or desert when they look within themselves. They are wanting of God. They see their need for God. In the ancient world, beggars were physically challenged in some form and unable to provide for themselves. And so they live in the state of absolute dependence on the generosity of other people. So when Jesus said poor, he is describing the disciple who is keenly aware that they are spiritually destitute and must completely rely entirely on the grace of God for salvation and grace to live all of life. Those who are poor in spirit are those who are bankrupt of this world. They are ripped up of self-efforts, self-righteousness, self-reliance, self-dependence, and self-sufficiency. The portrait of a true Christian is first and foremost a spirit of absolute dependence on God. They are the opposite of those who had great confidence in their own righteousness. They know that they have nothing in themselves to commend them to God. They happily accept the place of unworthy servant whom Jesus described in Luke 17 verse 10. In the same way, when you obey me, you should say, we are unworthy servants who have simply done our duty. This is a profound statement and utterly devastating to the last vestige point of pride. The truly poor in heart always sees his need of God when he is most holy, and even when he is immensely sinful. He knows that he needs God. And Jesus teaches that realizing your need for God as the hallmark of being poor in heart, that is, not being self-sufficient and self-dependent and self-confident and self-reliant, you will have heaven as a thing of consequence. Heaven, Jesus teaches, is for those who desperately see their need for God, for they will find their highest happiness and join Him. This is humility, and the happiness of the poor in heart does not reside in being deserving, but in receiving mercy. Thank you for listening to today's episode of the Pilgrim Podcast. If you find it helpful, we encourage you to subscribe to the podcast or search our growing archive for more episodes. Join me next time as we journey through Scripture, exploring the Christian life and what it practically means to live as a pilgrim in this world.